Hello.
Okay, everyone, thank you for coming along and welcome to another one of our Lilydale Flying School online seminars. Tonight's topic, as I'm sure you can see on the screen, is what's next after your recreational pilot certificate or recreational pilot's license. This was requested of us by a attendee at one of the previous seminars who said it would be interesting if we did it, so we thought we probably should. Again, thank you all for coming along. We've got 20 at the moment. So what I would remind you to do, please, if you don't mind, is to keep your microphones muted and ask any questions through the chat screen, which hopefully you can all see. And we'll manage that way. And I'll interrupt Matt when it's appropriate for him to ask questions. But this will be a very interactive session. So please do ask us lots of questions. We really want you guys to get your teeth into this one. So a little bit of housekeeping. We will be trying to get this thing to behave itself. Sorry, come on, next page, please. The slide shows what we need. There we go. So tonight's topic is revolving mostly around what you can do with or without a private pilot's license. There are a bunch of things that you can do that don't require a PPL, some of which are very exciting. We had a guy today go off and do his first solo nav, and he's got an aerobatics rating, has competed in aerobatics. So you don't have to have a PPL to get involved in that sort of stuff. It's for both RAOS registered pilots and also GA pilots. There's a lot of overlap between the two. So again, that housekeeping, please, if we can remember to use the chat feature to ask questions. We will also take voice questions towards the end when it makes sense. And I'll relay the questions through to Matt whenever possible. And we are recording the session. It will be placed online within probably half an hour or so after this finishes. I'll have it up there on both our YouTube channel, which you can find if you search on YouTube for the Lilydale Flying School, or also our Facebook channel if you have a look for the Lilydale Flying School on Facebook. So our presenter tonight is Matt Gault, who some of you will already know. In fact, I suspect quite a few of you do. Matt's our RAOS CFI at the Lilydale Flying School, and he's one of our most experienced charter pilots. And in addition to that, he is also a GA Grade 1 instructor. And it's fair to say he's a bit of a leading light within the Lilydale Flying School and knows pretty much everything there is to know about the stuff that we teach, that's for sure. So I'm going to hand over now to Matt, and Matt's going to run the show from here. So again, please, questions through the chat screen, and over to you, Matt.
Thanks, Carl. Thanks for that wonderful endorsement and introduction. That was made me feel pretty good about myself. Thanks for that. But yeah, no, it's I've trained a lot of people in a lot of these avenues, and some of them I haven't trained in. Some of the things we're going to cover today, like tailwheel and formation. We'll talk a little bit about some of the options. But yeah, like Carl said, we'll start by talking about, so the starting point here is you've got your RPL or your RPC, and what are you going to do next? And as Carl mentioned, of course, PPL is on a lot of people's minds, and we'll talk about the reasons why you might want to do that. However, you don't have to. You may be wanting to take your flying elsewhere, or tailor it a little bit, tailor your training needs a bit better to your desires and goals in aviation. So yeah, so without any further ado, we'll get into it. So what I was thinking first, we might just tackle the RA side just briefly initially, and then we'll look at the GA side. And what I mean by that is, let's start by talking about the scenario where some of you out there might be working towards your recreational aviation recreational pilot certificate, your RPC. And we'll talk about some of the things that you could do once you've got that RPC. So probably known to most of you is that with an RPC allows you to fly only within the vicinity of the airport of departure, up to a maximum of 25 miles, or as restricted within the designated training area around that airfield, like at Lilydale. So our designated training area is as far as you can go if you depart Lilydale with only an RPC or an RPL. So the next logical step that a lot of RPC holders take is they say, well, That's great flying around the Yarra Valley. And well, actually, one of the first things they may do if they didn't do it in their RPC is to get a passenger endorsement, and then they can take passengers. Did you want to jump in there, Carl? Or? Cool. So yeah, but the next logical step in RA would be to get a cross-country endorsement so they can take the plane across Australia, basically. So to do that, we do a number of navigation exercises. The amount of navigation exercises range from about 7 to 10, including a couple of solo ones. Some people need to do more, maybe 11, 12. The more you get, the more experience you have when you get licensed. So that's a good idea anyway. But just to qualify, what can you do on an RPC with a nav endorsement? So you can basically fly anywhere in Australia without going into controlled or restricted airspace. And by the way, restricted airspace is kind of best from a practical point of view to just think of it as controlled airspace. Once you get a clearance in restricted airspace, you can operate, and it's very similar to operating in controlled airspace, usually like Class C, for those who understand what I mean by that. Class C airspace, like kind of like Essendon. Anyway, so an RPC with a nav endorsement allows you to go. You can pretty much go just about anywhere in Australia, avoiding controlled and restricted airspace. There's not a lot of things you can't do. There's just generally the city areas, the airports, you can't land there. So that is one limitation on flying in RA, is that at least in terms of RA qualifications, it does not allow you the ability to go into a controlled aerodrome without a certain exemption, i.e. people training out of Moorabbin. We can't really offer that though. Anyway, so that's RA in terms of navigation. There are other things we can do in RA, like formation, that we might talk about a little bit later. So that's an option if you're an RA pilot. We're possibly in the future looking into offering, looking to see if there's an avenue in which we can do training, RA training for a tailwheel endorsement. However, we currently offer it for GA, so we can talk about that a bit later. But yeah, so that's one of your options for RA, is to get you cross country. Now, looking at for all the GA pilots out there, or let's say you're an RA pilot and you want to convert to GA so that you can do some of the things that we're going to talk about that are more available to GA pilots, like enter controlled airspace, and maybe even go further with the PPL. So you can do a conversion from the RPC to the RPL. It's a relatively straightforward process. Really just involves jumping in our Warriors with qualified GA instructors and getting you up to speed, basically just learning how to fly the Warrior and doing some theory, engineering paper, that sort of thing. And the license aspect is pretty much a paperwork exercise that we can help guide you through. And effectively, CASA, who regulate general aviation, will recognize your qualifications that you've achieved in the RA sphere, and you then acquire a license that then needs to be validated essentially with what's called a flight review, which we can do. Myself or Gary or Teresa can do, and we can, that essentially makes you licensed as a GA pilot. So the paperwork exercise, getting your paperwork from CASA, you've now got an RPL, so you've gone from an RPC to an RPL. And so that's my dinner getting delivered. Thank you very much. Yeah, and then you can, sorry, I lost my train of thought. Yeah, go from RPC to RPL. The paperwork side of things done, you get your RPL in the mail, essentially. You need to get a medical as well. That's part of the process. But the flying portion, basically learn to fly the Warrior in a nutshell, and be assessed as competent to fly it with a flight review. Okay, so that's the transition from RPC to RPL if you want. It's a fairly straightforward process. There aren't new flying skills to learn. You just need to be able to fly them in the GA realm, essentially in a Warrior. And if you can fly a jab quite well, you're probably not going to find it too hard to transition to a Warrior. A Warrior, in many respects, in terms of stick and rudder skills and coordination, is actually easier to fly than a Jabiru. Most of us tend to agree with that. Okay, so let's say you have an RPL. So one of the things available to you with a GA RPL, let's say you're a GA student, you didn't go the RPL, the RA route, and you achieved an RPL with us, you can also get a navigation endorsement. And so that navigation endorsement will allow you, just like the RPC cross-country endorsement, allows you to fly anywhere in Australia. You can take as many passengers as you can fit in the plane, and we'll talk about limitations on planes in a minute. But you can go anywhere in Australia, you just can't enter controlled or restricted airspace. So the same privileges as an RPC with cross-country. Yeah, so that's one option. You could do that if you don't feel like doing the full PPL, or you feel like the privileges of going into controlled airspace are not something that you're interested in and you want to save a little bit of money. And also that means that you don't have to do the full CASA PPL exam. They do have an RPL, a navigation exam now that you can do, but you can do those at Lilydale with some organisations. So that's kind of a way to, as some of us might call it, I think Carl refers to it as a kind of like a PPL light, or in other words, with a cross-country endorsement. Now, let's say you've got an RPL and you have the cross-country endorsement, and then you decide, you know what, I do actually want to go into controlled airspace, but for whatever reason, you don't want to, go into a full proper flight test with an examiner for the PPL. There is a way to get that so-called PPL light and get essentially most of the privileges of a PPL, and that is to then add a controlled airspace endorsement to your RPL with NAV. Generally speaking, we would encourage someone who desires those things from the start to go for a PPL, but this is just another way to do it. So if you're a pilot out there with an RPL with a cross-country endorsement, and then you'd like to be able to go into Moorabbin and Essendon and anywhere else, you could even go into Sydney International if you wanted to, or Canberra is a good one, Albury maybe these are the kind of places you want to go, or down to Tassie, go to Launceston or Hobart. They're controlled aerodromes. Yeah, you can get a controlled airspace endorsement, and our instructors can train you and sign you off for that. So no official flight test required. You just get assessed by an instructor. So yeah, that essentially gives you all of the privileges of a PPL effectively, but just without the ability to go on and do some more advanced training.
So Matt, I've just had a question from Sam, and he wants to know your thoughts on skipping the PPL and going straight to a CPL from an RPC or an RPL.
Yeah, good question. That's an interesting question to answer. So there's two ways of looking at that. There's no regulatory requirement that requires you to do the PPL on the way. However, it is Lilydale's policy and strong advice to go through the PPL test phase. And that's basically the way we want our students to do it. Now, the reason for that, by the way, we don't financially benefit from that really in any way at all, because we don't do the exam in-house. That goes out to we get our trusty examiner. We usually get Lawrence Gillett to do our tests for us. So yeah, it's got nothing to do, there's no financial reasoning to do that. It's more just because we've seen, and instructors even who have been at other schools have seen the journey of going straight from an RPL, or technically the regs actually allow you to go from zero license to a CPL. I don't think anyone really does it, but it's not a good idea because first of all, it means that all your command flying needs to be signed out and supervised at all times by an instructor. So you never really get that true autonomy and freedom that can allow you to do some fun things on your way towards a CPL, essentially gaining more command experience. You can take your friends places and that sort of thing. So that's one thing you can't do, is you won't be able to take passengers cross country because you won't effectively be licensed for it. But the other main reason is if you try and skip the PPL or any of the other flight tests on the way through, it makes you a lot less test ready for the CPL. You haven't had that kind of test experience to the level of the CPL. And just for reasons that are hard to explain, it just doesn't tend to work out well for people. We've seen a lot of problems with that. And so at Lilydale, we don't really, we strongly discourage students from doing that, from skipping the PPL test if you're going towards a CPL. So we don't recommend it.
Can I add something to that?
Yeah, go for it.
I actually did exactly what Sam is asking to do within reason. I went from an RA cross-country endorsement via an RA instructor rating and then to CPL without a PPL. And I absolutely agree, it was not the best way to do it. I found preparing for the CPL test to be a lot more challenging than it probably would have been if I'd already done a PPL test. that test experience really is very, very valuable. And I probably did quite a few more training flights with instructors than I needed to, and ended up costing myself a lot more, simply because I just wasn't test ready, even though I could do all the skills on their own. So Matt's point about being test ready is I think really important from my own personal experience. I can vouch for. Do the PPL, don't go straight to a CPL.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair point. Actually, sorry, I wasn't thinking of you. Yours is quite a unique situation, isn't it? But it does show that you could do things that way, particularly the route you went, getting an instructor rating. So you're effectively, I mean, one advantage Carl had, that's a good point. It was he's saying that it was a disadvantage. One advantage you had was being able to work as effectively as a professional pilot for quite a long time before getting the CPL as an instructor. You're working as a professional. But yeah, you're right. I mean, that's a great example of where
even with that experience, and I was teaching cross-country flight as an RA instructor, I found the CPL test and preparing for it quite challenging, even though at the time when I actually finally did the test, I had 1,350 hours.
Yeah, there you go.
So yeah, do the PPL.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so that's a very good point. I guess that's yeah. It's in some ways it's hard to describe why. So why we strongly recommend doing it this way. But yeah, one of them is definitely one of the reasons is test experience, and the other one is the practicality of it, being able to do command hours without us having to, supervise all your flying. It would be problematic and restricts your freedom a lot with that flying. Yes, as Carl said, you want to. The thing with flying training, especially up the pointy end, going towards the CPL, you're doing your CPL navs in a narrow, which costs a little bit more with an instructor. And if it's going to lead, and we definitely think it will lead to you doing more training at that end than perhaps you might have if you did a PPL, those costs are going to rack up very quickly compared to the cost of getting that PPL test done. Yes, it's another test fee, but in the scheme of things, the test fee for a PPL is about the equivalent of less than 2 hours dual flying in an arrow. In fact, about an hour and an hour 1.6 or 1.7. So is it really going to save you that? We don't think so. So that's why we recommend doing it that way. Cool. Hopefully that, yeah. Just looking at Sam's question there, log PRC time. No, it does. You can still log pilot and command time. It doesn't affect that. It doesn't affect the physical logging of time. Like I said, it's there's nothing regulatory that stops you from doing it that way. That's not really the point. It's more just the practical nature of it and the lack of test experience, and just the general experience that most flight schools have had that it doesn't work out well. So it's the same for similar reasons. We recommend people who have an RPC and want to go straight to a PPL. We strongly recommend doing the RPL conversion first, which can all be done at Lilydale. You don't need an examiner. But we've just found that people who have tried to skip that step, it just takes them longer, and it's hard to put your finger on it, but it has led to people doing a lot more hours to go straight from an RPC to a PPL without that GA conversion in between. So that's our experience over many, many students trying it and doing it both ways. So yeah. So in summary, there's nothing legally that stops you doing that, but we are very strongly against it, basically, because it doesn't yield good results, in our opinion. Cool. So moving on, I shouldn't ignore those slides there, but okay. So we've looked at an RPL. You can have an RPL with a cross-country and CTA endorsements, and that effectively allows you to go anywhere during the day. In Australia, you can go into controlled and restricted airspace and go further afield. So that is one way to do it. That's, as Carl would call it, a PPL light would be an RPL with those endorsements. However, if that's your target from the start, it makes sense to just go straight towards a PPL. Okay, good. So we can talk about where to go from a PPL a little bit further in the session, but let's for now, if you just go back to that slide, Carl, let's talk about, let's say you don't want to do that PPL, and let's get away from looking at cross country, and let's look at some of the things that you can just do straight away with an RPL without having to do navigation exercises, which involve, quite a few hours, a lot of study and practice, and that expense. So there's other things that you can look at. You could look at design features. So in an arrow, you would need a CSU and retractable endorsement, and that can generally be accomplished in somewhere between 4 and 8 hours of flying with an instructor, and we can sign you off for that. So that's one design feature. Another design feature that you might be interested is tail wheel endorsement, which greatly improves your stick and rudder skills. It's a great challenge to flying tail wheel aircraft and opens you up to a whole different world of aircraft you could fly, and possibly other career options, particularly if you want to fly professionally. Even with a PPL, you can possibly get into glider towing, which usually involve tail wheel aircraft. So that might be an option that some budding CPLs might be looking for to try and get some command time. So yeah, tail wheel is an open door into that area of flying. And if for nothing else, it's just a lot of fun. So our instructor who teaches tail wheel is Murray Garrity. So you might have seen him around. He works part-time. And yeah, there it is. There's the Super Decathlon. Not our one, but the same type of plane that we have available. Ours is Kilo Alpha Romeo. Yeah, Murray can check you out for tail wheel in that aircraft. And that learning to fly that aircraft can lead to aerobatics as well. So that's something that can be taught at Lilydale if you so desire in the same aircraft. But you'd have to get your tail wheel first. So and be able to take off and land in a tail wheel aircraft. So that's another design feature endorsement. So we've covered constant speed unit, or technically called manual propeller pitch control, MPPC. That allows you to fly, basically anything that's fast and advanced will have a constant speed unit. The Decathlon does as well. And it allows the propeller to operate at variable propeller pitches in order to get more efficient operation of the engine propeller combination over various airspeeds and power settings. So basically any advanced aircraft will have constant speed units. So yeah, we can train you up for that. And then retractable undercarriage, pretty self-explanatory. There's a picture of the retractable undercarriage on a Bonanza, which incidentally is the exact same system that's on the Travel Air and pretty much all Barons as well. And yeah, so we can, doing your MPPC, or some people refer to it as your CSU, your manual propeller, and your retractable undercarriage opens the door to fly planes like the Arrow, which is generally what we train you in the Arrow. That's generally a really good starting platform. If you can fly a Warrior, then jumping in an Arrow is generally not a big deal. But then it can lead to something more advanced and fast and bigger capacity like a Bonanza and most twins. And while we're on that topic, getting a manual propeller pitch control, another way to do that at Lilydale is to jump in the Cherokee 6, which is a really good transition aircraft from, you can jump into it from a Warrior, but you'd probably be more prepared for it if you've flown the Arrow a little bit. And the Cherokee 6 is a big 6-seater, can carry a lot of weight, not as fast and scary as a Bonanza, which takes a bit of getting used to flying a Bonanza. Cherokee 6 is just that little step lower, but definitely a really good introduction to big 6-cylinder engines that require a lot of careful engine management. Now, I've just mentioned the Cherokee 6 and the Bonanza, but there is one little caveat on learning in those aircraft. So, and we should bring it up, which is there is an overall restriction on the size or the weight of aircraft that you can fly with an RPL. So if you've got an RPL, you actually cannot fly in command in an aircraft that has a max takeoff weight above 1,500 kilos. So the Arrow fits under that, but the Cherokee 6, so does the Air Tourer, But the Cherokee 6 and the Bonanza and basically any twin and anything any bigger than those aircraft are going to be over 1.5 ton max takeoff weight. And so you're going to need a PPL to be able to fly those licensed in command, basically. So yeah, ultimately taking that step to PPL is going to be required to get into those bigger 6-seat aeroplanes and more advanced and fast. So yeah, Cherokee 6. Cherokee 6 is an aircraft that's often not. A lot of pilots at Lilydale don't know that it's available, but it's a really good if you've been flying on a PPL with our Archers or even the Arrows, and you're looking to take on take some more passengers. Maybe it's just that you want to take some more freight and more weight, and you want to go a little bit faster. And Cherokee 6 is a perfect aircraft to get into. It's not too hard to get checked out in it. Anywhere from 4 to 10 hours in it should get you checked out. But 4 or 5 is quite realistic if you're on the ball. And it allows you to take 6 passengers, cruise at about 135 knots. And per passenger per mile, it's definitely more cost effective than an Arrow. And probably, I'd say if you get 5 or 6 adults into it, it's and you can do that with a slightly lower fuel range, it'd be more economical, I'm pretty sure, than even an Archer. And Archers are really pretty economical. So it's a really underutilized aircraft, and by some underrated aircraft at Lilydale, but the Cherokee 6 is a really good one to get into. And especially if you're looking at going on to CPL, it's a really good introduction into big 6-cylinder engines that you're going to be flying at in the professional sphere. And you can get up to speed with something bigger and heavier before jumping into something as high performance and fast as a Bonanza. So it's a really perfect plane to get into.
So Matt, we've just had a question from Michael Tulip, and he's curious to know that if you've already got the CSU endorsement, roughly how long do you think it might take to get checked out on the Cherokee 6?
Yeah, sure. Well, I know Michael. We've done a lot of flying together, and he's quite experienced. And look, I'd say, let's say 3 to 5 hours. So yeah, it could be quite low. Basically, the Cherokee 6, it's pretty placid to fly, a bit like Warriors and Archers. The main tricky thing about it is the very high nose attitude while taxiing, especially if you've got weight in the back, and just landing it. It's very important to land it mains first, and you've got to get to a very high nose attitude in the hold off to get there. And it can just be a little bit tricky to not land it flat, or worse still on the nose wheel. That's tricky about it. And then the other thing that we do, and we'll do this with any 6-seat aircraft, before we let you loose and go and fly with passengers, is we try to rally up some people, and we work out a way to get the aircraft close to max weight. And so you do your training, just you and the instructor, but then we do at least a few circuits, or at least a couple anyway, if you're really getting it right, with close to max weight, and you can see just how different it handles, how different the pitch characteristics are, the performance, and also just the inertial characteristics of how it accelerates and decelerates, and that inertia with speed changes on final, that sort of thing. It takes a little bit of getting used to, but again, sets you in really good stead for getting into, say, a Bonanza or even twins. In answer to your question, Michael, I'd say for yourself, I wouldn't bank on less than 3. It's possible, but I'd say at least 3 hours, 3 to 5 is what I'd budget for. So yeah. Cool. Does anyone have any other questions relating to what we were just talking about? So design feature endorsements. Did I miss any? There are others, of course, but I'm just thinking any that are relevant to Lilydale aircraft and Lilydale instructors. Tail wheel, manual propeller pitch control, also commonly known as CSU. So that's that variable propeller endorsement, and retractable. Did I miss any? Actually, while I'm on that, it's just to cover it. We can check you out for pressurization. If we can find a plane around Lilydale with pressurization, we can check people off for that. But that's a bit of a unique one. It's very aircraft specific. Does anyone have any other questions? If not, I think we might move on.
Sam has asked if we've got an RA registered tailwheel aircraft at Lilydale at the moment, and unfortunately the answer to that is no, we don't. We did have a Eurofox for a little while, but we've lost that one. We don't have any RA registered tailwheel aircraft. Pardon me. It's not the Rona, it's hay fever. We can only do tailwheel training at the moment in the Super Decathlon. Hopefully that will change at some point, but we don't have anything yet.
That's right, exactly. Yeah. So we'd love to be able to offer it in RA, particularly given that, and you can see for yourself, the Super Decathlon is quite a very capable plane and very, very well, very beautiful plane, powerful and great for aerobatics and that sort of thing. It's not the cheapest thing to fly. Like, it's probably similar cost to, what is it, somewhere between an Archer and an Arrow per hour. So yeah, so we're definitely interested, if we can, no promises, but yeah, if we could work out a way to do RA tailwheel, it's definitely something. So one thing you can do is, if that's something that really appeals to you as an RA or GA pilot, then send all your requests courtesy of Jonathan Merridew at YV Aviation, and maybe you can convince him to invest in a plane. So if there's enough demand for it, then maybe we could do that. So it's definitely something that we want to encourage people to do, because the thing with tailwheel is it's a great skill building exercise and endorsement to gain. It'll improve your tricycle flying as well, because it just reinforces those stick and rudder skills and the importance of remaining coordinated and a few other unique skills to tailwheel. But it's also something that you can do and challenge yourself with, even if the weather's poor. Like, let's say you are doing your navigation training and the weather's good in the Yarra Valley, but for whatever reason you can't go ahead with your nav. Well, wouldn't it be great if you've made it all the way out to the airport, if you could jump in with your instructor into a tailwheel and work on that on the side? Would be something we've thought about trying to encourage people to do. And yeah, getting an RA registered aircraft, tailwheel aircraft, would greatly help with that. So watch this space. We'll see if we can make that happen at some stage. Okay, so those are design feature endorsements. There's also flight activity endorsements, and I mentioned one which was aerobatics, which we do have some ability to teach, but there's just very, very low demand for it at the moment. So it might take a little bit of organisation to get onto that, but we've certainly got the aircraft for it. However, we also have instructors. Murray, again, is our GA instructor for formation flying. But yeah, formation is a flight activity endorsement that's a lot of fun, a real social exercise, something that requires very detailed briefing before you go. That's a requirement of flying formation, and allows you to fly essentially as a team with other pilots, and requires really improves your attention to detail and your fine motor skills, because you picture this: you're on downwind, you gain 20 or 30 feet, you hardly see the altimeter move. There's no real visual reference that you've climbed that high, or for that matter, any changes.
So it looks like we've briefly lost Matt. I'm just trying to get in touch with him to see if he's had an issue with his link. So just bear with us for a couple of seconds while we try and deal with this. I'll have him back to you very shortly. This is where I need a little test pattern and some hold music. Just give me a couple of minutes. He's actually dropped completely off the network. So just give me a few minutes while I try and sort that out for everyone. So just while we're trying to get Matt back with the formation stuff, there is a strong community of pilots who do fly formation out of Lilydale. And when the COVID restrictions weren't affecting us as they have been, we had a group of about 6 or 8 formation flyers quite often flying on Thursday evenings. So it was a really good opportunity. One of the big challenges with formation is actually getting enough people together to do it. So we're fortunate that we've got some very enthusiastic formation pilots, and Murray is a formation instructor to get you going in that. And you can do that in anything. You can fly formation in the Jabiru, you can fly it in the Warrior. You might see in that photo there on the slideshow, the aircraft in the background is a little hotted up air tour and a couple of Warriors. That particular group of formation people also did something fairly interesting a couple of months ago before our latest lockdown. And that was they flew a whole formation into Tullamarine Airport, which was pretty amazing. We've got some photos of it. Matt's just come back now, so I'll just hand back over to him as soon as he all gets underway. Where are you, Matt? Here we are. So, Matt, I was just talking briefly about the formation team at Lilydale that flies on Thursday evenings most of the time, and also a little tiny bit about their adventures going in and out of Tullamarine before the current restrictions were placed on us. So back to you, Matt.
Yeah, g'day. Sorry, I'm back on. Not sure what's going on here with the internet, but hopefully we can avoid that happening again. Yeah, so formation's definitely something that could be a lot of fun, real social exercise. And yeah, as Carl said, we've got, when we're not in lockdown, we have a regular formation kind of get together, a number of formation pilots, and we can offer training in formation as a flight activity endorsement, which is definitely something you can do on an RPL. And also, I don't think we do it a whole lot with the current group, but if people are wondering, I'm an RA pilot, can I do it? There definitely is a way to do that. So I know one of our RA instructors, Graham Bunn, has his formation, and I think, don't quote me, but I think he would be able to teach it too. But anyway, that's definitely something we can look into, is doing formation in Jabiru's. It's a possibility, and it has been done before. So, but currently the current formation group tend to use the GA aircraft, the Warriors and Archers, and some private owner aircraft, like just in the picture there. That's I think that's Tony and Angela's Victor, I think. Anyway, they've definitely flown theirs.
Yep, that's their little red Victor that they got about 6 months ago.
Yes, that's the one. Cool. Yeah, does anyone have any questions relating to formation? Or anything else we've been recently talking about?
I think, Matt, one of the big questions about formation in particular is how to get started with it. It's a demanding discipline, as we know. But I guess one of the big questions with formation is how do you go about getting involved in it in the first place? A lot of the other drills are much more, you can go and do it within weather reasons whenever you like, subject to the availability of instructors. But with formation, you need at least one other airplane, or it's not much of a formation. That's something that we can do at Lilydale, again, because we have that strong community of pilots who pretty much any chance they'll get, they come and fly formation.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Yeah, that's right. So yeah, that's a good point. So yeah, you could, let's see, so you could do it with another student who wants to train if we've got 2 instructors available. So you could do it like that. But yeah, you're right. You could also just ask one of the qualified formation pilots that come in and out of Lilydale. And yeah, I'm sure there's plenty of jump at the chance to help with your training as being that second aircraft.
You also often find with that too, Matt, that the people who do it quite often have a spare seat in their plane. And if you want to just have a bit of a dabble in what it's like to be inside a plane during a formation, which is quite an interesting experience the first time it happens. Often on those, when that Thursday night crew restart, once these restrictions get lifted, if you just basically roll up on a Thursday night and say, I'd like to have a ride, can I? Quite often there'll be a spare seat. That's a bit of a speculator, though. You'd probably want to, I guess, give us a ring first and see if you can. But if you do want to dabble your toes in the water of formation and see what it's all about, most of those people who are flying, they're really keen to share the joy. And if you want to hop in the right-hand seat or hop in the back seat or something like that, you'll almost always find that someone's only too happy to pop you in their plane and have you ride with them.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a very good point. yeah, so by all means, come and check it out, and just give us a call, and beforehand, and we'll see if we can arrange with someone. Very good. So okay, good. So moving on. Yeah, sorry, I've probably covered this out of order. I didn't. I lost track of it there. Okay, yeah. So this slide shows just to maybe just revisit it a little bit. So RPC, you can get a cross country. RA only qualifications do not allow flight into controlled airspace. You need you need to gain those qualifications through the GA system, i.e. an RPL with a CTA, CTR endorsement, or with the full PPL. And one thing I should point out there, if someone out there is looking to have that capability, but they're thinking they're looking at buying an airplane and they'd like to go the cost-effective route of they'd like to go the cost-effective route of getting an RA registered plane. I do want to stress that although we don't tend to take our RA planes into controlled airspace very often for a few different reasons, if you owned your own, you definitely can fly an RA aircraft into controlled and restricted airspace. There's no restriction on the registration of the aircraft, except occasionally in the past there have been specific airports, but there's no general restriction at all. And even then it's usually just with permission. But generally speaking, RA aircraft can go anywhere. It's the qualification of the pilot that's limiting. So if you had an RA aircraft and let's say you wanted to go in and out of Moorabbin or Essendon or transition with a clearance through the West Sail airspace or whatever it is you want to do,
I'm not quite sure what's happening there with Matt's internet link, but it looks like we've lost him again. This is an area that I know a little bit about, so I'll kind of fill in the gaps just while I ping Matt and get him to restart his connection. I'm not quite sure what's going on there, but we just had a question there from Brad asking about doing the RPC first, doing cross-country endorsement with RA. You can do it that way. A number of people have kind of gone both ways with doing the GA or an RA cross-country endorsement. It doesn't really matter. Doing it the RA pathway, the aircraft themselves are a bit cheaper, but additionally to that, the Jabiru is a bit more challenging to fly than a Warrior or on a nav. So when you're trying to manage writing and keeping track of all of the stuff on bits of paper and so forth, it's a bit easier to do the navs in the Warrior, although it's cheaper to do them in the Jabiru. So there isn't really a right answer to that. I can tell you my own personal experience. I did the RA cross-country endorsement in a Jabiru and then transitioned across to flying Warriors, so you certainly can do it. But I found the first few navs to be quite challenging, simply because trying to fly a little airplane bouncing around in a bit of turbulence while managing all of that navigation stuff was probably harder than it would have been in a Warrior. But then again, you weigh that up against the Warriors, an extra $100 an hour. Again, I don't think there's a right answer. It probably depends on what you're most comfortable with, Brad. So yeah, I don't think there's a right answer to that. With regards to, Ahmed wants to know what the aircraft limitations are with an RPL cross country. RPL cross country, you're limited to 1,500 kilograms, and I think only one passenger. So it's very similar to an RPC. Hopefully that answers your question. While we wait for Matt to try and get himself back online. I'm not quite sure what's going on with his broadband link. I'm not sure who STA trainer is, but you've asked if, Matt's coming in with a different piece of equipment now. Can you do night VFR on an RPL? I don't know. Matt will know. We'll find out for that in just a second. So I think Matt's just about got himself back online. Yep, there we go. So again, I just filled in a few of the gaps there, Matt. We've had a couple of questions about, Erica and Tom, there we go. We've just had a couple of questions about cross-country endorsements in a RA or GA aircraft. Matt, just so you know where we're coming from. And a question we've been asked that I don't know the answer to is, can you do night VFR training on an RPL?
Hey, can you hear me there, Carl?
Yep, we've got you now.
Awesome, cool. I just logged in on the iPad. I don't know what I think it was the I'm on cellular now, so hopefully it won't drop out. Yes, so to answer that question, can you do a night VFR on an RPL? No, you can't. So that's that was the next thing we were going to get to is, I was actually, I think I was probably talking to myself when I dropped out. What are the restrictions between RPL and PPL? So one of the main drivers that would drive you to get a PPL is the desire to go further with your training in terms of operational ratings. And that is a night VFR rating or an instrument rating. Technically an instructor rating you can do on a PPL, but that's more of a CPL thing. But yes, to answer your question, unfortunately, you cannot fly at night on an RPL, not without an instructor, of course. Yeah, so you can't gain a night VFR rating. So night VFR, and then it brings up the question, and I think we might have talked about this in another thing quite a few weeks ago, and Carl's got it here on the slide, is that you certainly can do a night VFR rating here at Lilydale, but if you really want to fly at night in, particularly in the Melbourne area, where the weather is, the thing with night VFR is, trying to put it in layman's terms, you've got all the restrictions of IFR and of VFR, i.e. you've got to stay above what's called a lower safe altitude, so that can get quite high in the Melbourne area. But then you've also got to avoid cloud and maintain a VMC, which is difficult at night because they're harder to see. And so that means that the amount of times you're not going to be able to launch for a night VFR flight are very high, except for, in the summer months, in which case, why would you need it? Because, would you really want to go flying that late at night? Probably not for operational reasons, but more for scenic reasons. So basically, if you want all the advantages of IFR, then just do an instrument rating, because if you do the instrument rating, and we can talk about difference between a private instrument rating and the instrument rating, what used to be called the command or full instrument rating. Both of those have the first of all, the full instrument rating gives you night privileges, and the private instrument rating you can either include night or not. But if you do, as long as your instrument rating is valid, you have night privileges, and you can fly night VFR, no problem. But in my opinion, why would you? Because once you've learned IFR, IFR in a lot of respects is easier than IFR at night is easier than VFR at night, because you've got a traffic service controller watching out for you. Getting clearances is easier. You have priority, and you don't need to be constantly dodging clouds. So IFR, if you want to fly at night properly, we can do a night VFR rating, but to be perfectly honest, the instrument rating is the better way to go. Yes, it's more training, but you'll actually get real use out of it, and much more capability.
The other issues with trying to do night VFR, in particular in the Melbourne Basin, is that even to get the training flights, the weather just makes it impossible. So
it's difficult.
VFR, if you're in the Melbourne Basin, so on this side of the Great Dividing Range, a night VFR rating is not only not terribly practical from the point of view of trying to go places with it, but it's also very hard to train for. If you're on the other side of the divide, that's a different story, when the weather in the inland Australia tends to be a lot clearer at night. But we get that low cloud, and you can't see clouds at night. You just can't see them until you're in them.
It's difficult.
Unless the gully bangers and they're full of lightning. But so we really do steer people away from trying to do night VFR ratings if they're based in Melbourne itself.
Yes, good point. Yeah, just to illustrate, this may go over the heads of some people, but I just thought it's kind of interesting anecdote. I remember listening on the radio to an aircraft ahead of me, flying IFR, both of us were, at night, and this aircraft was trying to get into an airport like Lilydale. And basically, without going into too much detail, you have to maintain this lower safe altitude. You can't go any lower, even though you might be able to see the ground. You can't do it until you're established in what's called the circling area. And sometimes when the cloud's marginal, as Carl said, it's hard to see the cloud. And I remember the controller wanted to offload this aircraft because it was in controlled airspace, and the controller was assuming, and the plan was that pilot would get visual in the circling area and then descend and be out of the controller's hair. And the controller started to get a little bit short because he said, look, so-and-so, are you visual? And the pilot was, not sure. And the controller, perhaps not being a pilot, sort of thought, well, you're either visual or you're not. Like, what's the problem? And he's sort of like, are you visual? Are you visual now? You know, and you can see this urgency. And that's the thing, is I really empathize, because I've been in the same situation, and you're waiting to get into that circling area, and maybe you can see the ground now. And you think, yeah, I'm visual. But you don't want to tell them until you can maintain visual, because that's just there's a reason why you don't want to do that, because you'd have to change plans. And then all of a sudden you pop in and out of cloud. No, you can't see anything. And so you look out ahead, and the cloud looks grey and the sky looks grey. And, you know, if you look carefully, you might be able to see the difference, but it's under certain light conditions, it can be very, very hard to tell whether you're about to go into cloud or not yet. And much more comfortable to have an instrument rating in those conditions, rather than trying to dodge it, while also trying to comply with essentially all the restrictions of an instrument rating. You don't get all the benefits. And there's a lot of benefits to flying IFR. Most people say that, you know, the training's the hardest part you do. You get the instrument rating, and 9 out of 10 flights are in many respects easier than VFR, because you've got all the help, and you don't have to dodge clouds necessarily. You might still want to, but you don't absolutely have to. So yeah, there's a lot of advantages to an instrument rating. And following on from that, so unless anyone has any specific night questions, I might then talk a little bit about instrument ratings, if everyone's happy with that. Sorry, Carl, my chat, because I just joined, is empty. I hope everyone's still enjoying the stream there. If you've got any questions, or if you want to hear something different, just yell out, and we can cover it.
What are the aircraft limitations with an RPL and cross country? And I think I answered his question, but it's 1500 kilograms for an RPL cross country, and I think you can only carry one passenger.
No. Yeah, so you can carry 4. My understanding is there's no passenger limit with RPL. Where the 1 passenger limit comes from is if you don't have a class 2 medical, but if you're operating on a RAMPC, RAMPC, that's the restriction of passengers. And I think it also restricts you flight not above 10,000 feet, which is that right? Yeah. Anyway, yes, but yeah, the restrictions on RPL can't fly an aircraft above 1.5 tons, and can't fly turbine or rocket powered. So I can hear you all sighing there, and damn, can't fly a rocket powered aircraft on my RPL. I was really hoping to do that. So if you want to fly rocket powered, you need your PPL. So yeah. Cool. Question from John. This is a good question, actually. Not worth getting your IFR before CPL. Yes, so certainly can be done. Technically, that's what happened with me, but it was the CPL that I did was kind of a course, and probably in hindsight, not the best way to do your CPL, not the way we do it at Villadale. We just basically, with CPLs, we recommend that you get your CPL before doing your instrument rating, but you don't have to. Basically, probably the way to look at that is it's best not to see don't try and do the instrument rating as a means to gaining the hours for a CPL, because to be at commercial standard, 200 hours, or as some schools do it, 150, it's really not probably enough time for most people to get to that CPL standard. 200 is more realistic, definitely, but in terms of people being at that CPL standard well before 200 hours, it's not likely. And the CPL flight test and just CPL flying involves, a high level of flying, a high level of flexibility and professionalism in the VFR environment, which is kind of different to the IFR environment. IFR, at least in the test environment, is more structured. There are less surprises in instrument rating test. So it's probably not right to say that an instrument rating test is necessarily harder or easier than a CPL test. It's just a different kind of test. So I don't know if that's totally making sense, but I brought that up because preparing for a CPL test, you really probably would rather be just focused on really good VFR flying and nav skills, and then jump into the instrument rating. And then you'll be raring to go for instrument rating. So that's what we strongly recommend, going for the CPL first. But if you really want to do it a different way, that's fine as well. I don't see, to my knowledge, I don't think there's any huge drawbacks to doing it the other way. But if CPL is what you, sorry, and there's another point to this too. As a CPL, let's say you get your CPL 200 hours, 210, 220, whatever. And, you've probably worked very hard to save the money for all that flying. And it's probably been quite difficult for a lot of people to get to that stage. The best thing you can do career-wise, in what most of us recommend, is just try and get your first job anywhere. And if you're willing to move interstate and move to go and get that job, that's the best way to do it. There is the option of doing an instructor rating, and that will give you more access to jobs generally, although on current climate it might be a little bit different. But that generally gives you more access to jobs in the major cities. But if you're willing to go remote, you can get your first job as a CPL. It's easier to get. But even if you had an instrument rating, that might work in your favor to some degree. But with 200 hours, I highly doubt that anyone's going to let you do a commercial op IFR, and particularly not IFR at night, with only 200 hours. That's more of a 500, 800 hour kind of task, if that makes sense. Especially when it comes, say for almost certainty that no one's going to let you do IFR charter unless it's ICAS until you've got probably around the 500 hour mark. That's generally how the industry works. So from that perspective, how useful is it to have your instrument rating? Well, okay, you got it out of the way. That's how it worked with me. But to give you a good example of mine, I got that instrument rating. I did get it before the CPL, but it's just the way they structured it. I failed my CPL test the first time, so maybe that's a good litmus test. But yeah, I got that instrument rating. It was valid for a year. I didn't use it at all. And I didn't fly IFR and command again until 10 years later here at Lilydale, when I made the transition to IFR charter after doing plenty of time doing VFR charter in the Bonanzas and a little bit in other aircraft, but mainly the Bonanzas, which was a perfect kind of apprenticeship to doing IFR charter. And it means that the jump to IFR charter is actually not really much harder. In some ways, it's easier. Like I said, you probably, all things considered, on your average charter, you're actually working harder as a VFR charter pilot than you are as an IFR, unless the weather's particularly bad. And then you probably wouldn't go VFR. But in Australia, probably 8 times out of 10, it's harder work doing VFR charter. But yeah, so that's my reasoning for leaving the instrument rating to one side. Look, if you get, so just our recommendation, and definitely go and talk to Jono if you want more advice on that, or Gary as well, of course. Jono is a good one to talk to. He knows a lot of people around and speaks to people who may be able to offer that first job. And yeah, your first job's going to be a day VFR job, more than likely. So, Matt, so just focus on the CPL.
Just to pop into this one a little bit too, there's a lot of people who are thinking about going down the PPL path and not necessarily considering aviation as a career, at least not in the short term. Well, I never say never, because you never quite know what's going to turn out, what opportunities are going to appear in front of you. What about the consideration of private pilots and instrument ratings?
Yes, absolutely. Yes, sorry. I should have mentioned that. So with everything I just said in response to John's question, it was mostly framed at John, and I know John has, a lot of drive and desire to become a CPL and become a professional pilot. So everything I said there with respect to waiting to get a CPL before getting your instrument rating, not applicable to someone who, if you're a PPL and want to get your instrument rating, then absolutely go for it, do it. There's nothing stopping you. It was more, that was specifically in the context of CPL and getting a job. That's all. Yeah. So as you said quite rightly, Carl, there, if you want those IFR capabilities as a PPL, absolutely go for it. And I know Michael asked a question for Michael Chewett. We've done a bit of training. He's very close to getting his instrument rating. If it weren't for COVID, he'd definitely have it by now. So good. So yeah, let's talk more about instrument rating. So there are 2 types. There's the private instrument rating and just the instrument rating, which used to be called the command instrument rating. It's not anymore though. So the only real, the flight test standards are actually the same. The way to think of the difference is that, first of all, if you want to fly IFR for money, i.e. commercially, then you need the instrument rating, i.e. the full instrument rating, what used to be called command. However, if you don't want to do that and you only want to do private operations, IFR, then you can do the private instrument rating. And the main difference is the private instrument rating is more flexible in terms of what capabilities you want to include or leave out. So you can reduce the amount of training required. So I'll give an example. So with the full instrument rating, you're required to do the night component. The test is done during the day, but you get the privileges of night. But it does involve more training. It requires you to do a 2D and 3D approach. So you have to do more approaches and essentially more work. You have to do, the exams are slightly different, but that's not actually that big a deal. We can talk about the exam requirements, but there's also a higher requirement for instrument flight time for the instrument rating, the full one. So let's say you want to do an instrument rating in less time and with less capability, but tailored to your own needs, and you only want to use it private, then absolutely go down the private instrument rating path. The training is essentially the same. It's just what we include and what we leave out. So the private instrument rating you can do with half the required instrument flight hours. And you can do a private instrument rating with only one approach. Yeah, so Carl's putting in something there. You might be thinking, well, what are approaches? So there are various approaches that use various navigation aids. Essentially, the way to look at it is probably there's 5 types, but the most common type and the approach that you will have available at any airport that has an approach will have an RNAV approach, which is effectively, that's basically a GPS approach. So you could do a private instrument rating and only have ever done and only be tested on one type of approach, an RNAV approach. And that's going to get you by any airport you want to go into. We often, so you could do an instrument rating no night. You don't have to do SIDS and stars. If you don't know what that is, don't worry about it. And you don't have to do the other 4 kinds of approaches. You could just do an RNAV and there's a requirement for a minimum of 20 hours instrument flight. And any you've got already, if you've got your 2 hours for PPL, that counts. So it's only 18 more to go. And you can do up to half of that in the sim. And you'll do plenty of sim stuff. The instrument ratings always start in the sim. It's the place to start for sure. Until you get a few skills up, and then we can look at taking it into the aeroplane. And of course, a lot cheaper to start that way as well. But anyway, only 20 hours IF required for a private instrument rating, and you can tailor it to your needs. The other advantage is it's valid for 2 years. You have your privileges for 2 years. And then to renew it, you just have to do a flight review. So you don't need to get an examiner. You can do that flight review with myself or Gary. And we jump up, and it's not quite test conditions. You know, if anyone knows how flight reviews work, we say it's not a test, but it is an assessment. So some small amount of training, retraining, your skills deteriorate over the 2 years. That's okay. And as long as they can be fixed up in the flight, then you get signed off. If not, you do another flight. And it's not really a pass or fail. It's just competent or not yet competent. Whereas a flight test involves a bit more pressure. So looking at that, contrasting that with the instrument rating, what used to be called the command rating, you have to do more approaches. You have to do the night component. It's not optional. So you need to get that night experience. And you do the flight test, and then you're only current for 1 year. And to renew every year, you need to do what's called an instrument proficiency check. And that can only be done with a examiner. So myself or Gary can't do that for you. We need to get Lawrence or someone else to do that. And it is a fairly routine flight, but just remember it is under test conditions. So you might feel like you want to do some training before that, which you might want to do for a flight review anyway. But basically, the way to think of it is the private instrument rating gives you more flexibility. The only downside to doing a private instrument rating is that you just can't use it commercially. That's it. If you get people telling you, oh, no, it's to a lower standard, that's nonsense. It's absolutely not true. And to prove that, you can look in Part 61 Manual of Standards has the flight test standards. And if you're going towards your PPL or RPL or CPL test, I recommend your instructor should be showing you what those flight test standards are. It's like plus or minus 150 feet, plus or minus 10 degrees heading. That's the non-professional standards, PPL and RPL. But the CPL standards plus and all instrument rating standards are plus or minus 100 feet, plus or minus 5 degrees on heading. The standards are the same for the private instrument rating and for the full instrument rating. There's no difference in standard. It's really just the application and the flexibility of a private instrument rating. And hey, you could start your training and decide halfway through that you want to do one or the other. It really doesn't matter. You could decide right at the end. It's not really a big deal, except for the fact that the full instrument rating just requires that you cover more approaches and you need to do your night component. But it gives you the kind of the whole meal deal, if that's a good analogy. Whereas the private instrument rating, you can just get the one thing that you want and tailor it to yourself and do it in less hours. And then you've got that flexibility of renewing every 2 years with a flight review, which might be a little bit more practical, because you can just get myself or Gary to do that for you. Does anyone have any questions on the instrument rating? Or any questions on the differences between the private instrument rating and the instrument rating? The full one. I don't think there's any questions. All right. Yeah, so there's another slide up here. Sorry, does someone want to jump in there? Is that you, Carl?
You're all good. Go ahead. We did a course online on using the GPS. As I'm sure Matt will explain, you can use a GPS as a primary navigation aid when you're flying IFR, but there's something else that you might not necessarily know that I'm sure Matt can tell you all the details about, because we ran a course on this a couple of weeks ago. And if you do want to do it, we've got the course material online. So yeah, anyway, sorry, Matt, I won't steal your thunder. Get into it.
Yeah, sure, no worries. Yes, so the current slide up mentions GNSS, which is Global Navigation Satellite System, of which the GPS, which is the American system, is the system that we use here in Australia. There are others technically, but yeah, basically you're looking at most people understand what GPS is. So one of the little bits of training, and it's a relatively minor thing that we can offer here, and we developed some online resources and a online test that you can do from home as the theory or ground component of this qualification, if you want to call it that, is basically giving you the ability to be assessed competent by us as being able to use GPS as a primary means of navigation. So it's a little bit complex to explain exactly what we mean by that. Basically, anyone familiar with PPL or cross-country, RPL cross-country training would understand that you're required to be able to primarily navigate with reference to ground, and you'll always learn those skills. They're the most important navigation skills you'll ever learn. However, once you're getting the hang of those skills, we'll then tend to say, well, hey, we've got this GPS in the plane, and it's important you know how to use that too, because, why not use both? GPS has a very high level of accuracy. It's not a dirty word. It's not a cheap way of navigating. It's just a very, very powerful tool that also requires some training. So even as a visual pilot, we can give you some more in-depth training on the GPS, and particularly useful for in our archers, and soon to be in one of our warriors as well. We're going to have, we have the same type of GPS across the board, which is the Garmin 400 series GPS. And they are used in IFR, but you can use in VFR, and they've got some really great capabilities that will assist you in your navigation. Now, just being very careful to explain what this allows you to do. Once we've done the training and we ask you to pass this online exam and do a short demonstration for us in flight, which we'll be able to do when we come out of lockdown, we'll probably give some kind of certificate. And if you really want to, we can write it in your logbook, although that's not necessary. And what we're doing is we're deeming you competent to use GNSS or GPS as a primary means of navigation. Now, to be clear, that doesn't mean that we're certainly not encouraging people to go, well, I can just get on top of the cloud and go wherever I want, and I'll be fine now because I've got a GPS. That's very problematic for a VFR pilot. You can get yourself into all sorts of trouble. However, being very, very careful and very careful flight planning and understanding your escape routes and that sort of thing, you would want to be assessed as competent to do this in order to fly over perhaps scattered or maybe for a short period even broken cloud, where visual reference to the ground for navigation is not available or practical. So that is technically legal. It's legal to do that. However, only if you yourself are deemed competent in the use of GPS. And as Carl's put on the chart, on the slide here, it may seem a bit counterintuitive, but being deemed competent doesn't require actually any official, doesn't require a logbook entry, but we can do that. And it doesn't require a license entry or anything that goes into CASA or anything like that. We now offer training, more formalized training on that. We've always been able to train people for it, but it's now a little bit more formalized, and we can give you a certificate as well. So yeah, we do encourage our PPL pilots to do that. If for nothing else, it'll make you a safer, more competent pilot. And yes, it does give you the capability to perhaps fly above some slightly more marginal weather than you might have otherwise, but you've got to be extremely careful. Another use for this would be if you want to go, if you've got a PPL and you want to take one of our planes across to the Tassie Islands, King Island or Flinders Island, then really you want to be very competent in GPS before taking that on, just because there's a little bit less visual reference out there over the strait when you're between islands and that sort of thing. So GNSS is going to give you that peace of mind, give you your exact position, which is useful for reporting if you want to take that on as well. So yeah, definitely something we encourage all pilots to do if they are so inclined and have the time to do that, is go through our GPS training course. And yes, and sorry, the slide says there we can combine that with your next 3MC, so that's a good way to do it. A couple of months ago, myself and Gary did a 2-part kind of seminar on the principles of GPS was the first part, and then how to use our GPS is the second part. And we then have an exam that you can sit online, and we ask you to do that, and then you can come in and do maybe an extended 3MC instead of half an hour flight. Maybe we extend it to an hour. We go away from the training area a little bit, maybe head down towards Moorabbin or somewhere else if you like, and you can demonstrate to us, and we can show you the GPS. You can demonstrate your competency, and we can deem you competent. Good. So yes. The GPS seminar, yeah, Carl just put in the chat there, it's on our YouTube channel, and then the Moodle allows you to get into that exam and have a crack at that once you've watched that presentation. Very good. Does anyone have any questions on that topic? I think that covers basically everything, doesn't it, Carl?
That's pretty much everything we wanted to go through tonight, I think, unless we've got some specific questions from anyone. So I'm pretty much going to throw the floor open to anyone who wants to unmute and have a bit of a chat with Matt about this. If you've got about another 10 minutes or so before you need to bail, if that's okay with you, Matt. But yeah, one of the big things, and I think something that we sometimes can get a little bit lost, is that we really want you to go out and fly around and have fun. Once you've got your RPC and your RPL, just fly around the valley and enjoy it. Flying is such an incredible adventure, and we're so enormously privileged to be able to have this opportunity to fly planes around. We really are extraordinarily fortunate to be able to do it. So spread your wings and use them. It is such an incredible experience to do. Every flight you do is an opportunity to not only improve what you do, which is important, but also just have a barrel of fun, which is really what we want. What we want everyone doing is flying and enjoying it. And we've got all these opportunities for you to further your training, and like formation, the guys who get involved in formation are really passionate about it. All the other sorts of endorsements and ways to continue to improve your learning. And one of the beautiful things about aviation is that you will never stop learning. There is so much to keep learning about, that it remains a physical and intellectual challenge throughout your entire flying career. So that's really what we'd like you to do. But those of you that have got any questions now, Matt's got a few more minutes before we give him a virtual bottle of red as a thank you. So what have you got? Give me some questions.
I'm looking forward to getting virtual drunk out here in my hotel room. Thanks, Carl. That's actually a really good point. I probably should have opened with, why did we give this presentation? And it was certainly not to discourage anyone from just getting in a plane and going for a flight. That's definitely, we encourage that immensely, and take up your friends and family and stay proficient just with the skills that you've already got. the reason why we gave today's presentation is simply because as a flying school, we understand that, everyone learns to fly for different reasons. Some people are more goal oriented than others. Others see it more as just a week-to-week hobby. So everyone has their own personal relationship with why they train and why they enjoy flight training. Is it a means to an end, or is it just an end in itself? And the reason why we put on this seminar or this talk is simply because, and this happens to all flying schools, is that some of the more, let's say, goal-oriented pilots who are doing it, maybe they feel it's more of a challenge, is the challenge that they're after. Once they've achieved that license, a lot of them, we often don't see them for a while. Maybe not everyone has the interest in just going up in the training area. It's great if you do, a lot of people do, but some are looking for that next challenge and looking for that way to improve their flying and do flying. They see it as quite and it is a huge challenge learning to fly, and doing all these other elements is going to keep them very occupied and give them a great sense of achievement. And that's partly why we put on this seminar, is to show you where you can take it if you feel like you've achieved something in flying but you're not sure where to go next. That's why we went over this today. So yeah, does anyone have any questions they want to ask? Carl could unmute, and we could, if you like, and we can have a one-on-one conversation or whatever. Open to any questions anyone has in the chat. We've got Justin Oates said, tell Jono to buy me a tailwheel plane to play with. And definitely something that I've mentioned Jono a couple of times, and we'll endeavour to look at maybe getting one RA if we can, but no promises. So
we would really love to have another tailwheel aircraft as well as the GA one. There's a couple of options floating around for them. We just need to find a good one at the right price. And obviously, we've had a bit of a cash flow issue with the whole COVID thing, which has delayed any sort of plans to expand. But we would love to have another tail dragger aircraft. It'd be even better if it was a radial. If anyone's got a spare 100 grand lying around, I know that's common these days. There is actually a Mark V Spitfire replica for sale, full size. It's for sale for $100,000, and it happens to be a tail dragger. And if you buy it, we'll quite cheerfully fly it for you. It's only got one seat.
Wow. Cool. So that's a full size replica.
Full size replica Spitfire. 100 grand. That's all. Just 100 grand. Only one seat.
Jeez. That'd be a lot of aeroplane, I reckon. Do you know what it's powered by?
It's got the Lycoming 520 supercharged engine in it, I believe.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
If you go Googling for Spitfires for sale in Australia, you'll find it pretty quickly.
Cool.
So, yeah, Michael said it's a Yak. Yak's got 2 seats, so that's a bit more convenient. But Spitfire, just wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, we found it already. Thank you.
The chat's going wild.
Talking a lot about the Spit in our study group meetings of late because we're all drooling all over pictures of it.
Nice, the elliptical wing.
And Michael, do you have a question for us? I'm seeing microphone movement, but no sound. I think that might be just about it then for the evening. I'd like to thank everyone, in particular Matt, for donating his time this evening to spend when he was obviously wanting to have some dinner with us going through all this sort of stuff. Thank you, Matt, very much for your contribution of all of the knowledge that you have about the different pathways through this. If anyone is interested in a study group too, I know that popped up as a bit of a discussion. Sometimes we don't publicise it as well as we'd like to. It's an unstructured group that meets on Monday nights, and at the moment we're restricted to Zoom for obvious reasons. If you do want to get involved in that, again, there's no structure to it. You just connect to a session which I publish on Monday evenings on our Facebook page, which we have specifically for that study group. If you want to get involved in it, just contact me. I've put my email address in the chat so you can see it, or just contact the flying school and they'll let you know. And that's where we publicise the information for it. It's completely unstructured. All it is a bunch of people who are studying at various stages of their development, and we just want you all to basically help each other out. And at the moment, it's probably not effective as a study group because the way it's working, we just end up talking about airplanes for an hour. which is kind of fun. That's really what it's all about. But we're not getting over the books and helping Matt May. Although if you do have questions, we do try and digest them. I facilitate that one. But in particular, not only thank you to Matt, but I'd like to thank all of you tonight for sparing your valuable time as well and getting involved with our community at Lilydale. We really do try and make it a community-focused flying school as much as we can, and we want you all involved. And as soon as we can, we'll get you guys up flying. We are hoping that on Sunday we'll get some good news. We can't make any promises whatsoever, but we are taking bookings. So if anyone does want to book in and brush some of the rust off their wings, we'll do it. So yeah, we're hoping to be back up and flying from Monday, but we can't. Again, we're at the whim of the numbers game that we're playing with this bug. So we have to obviously comply with government regulations in that regard. But thank you everyone for spending your Wednesday night with us. We do very much appreciate your company, and we'll have another one of these seminars almost definitely next Wednesday. Topic to be determined, but we'll try and come up with something interesting and rewarding for you all. So thank you all very much. Again, this session is recorded. I'll be putting it up online in the next half hour or so, and I'll post the link on our Facebook page and also on our YouTube channel, which should be pretty easy to find.
Cool. Thanks very much, Carl. Thanks for your help. Sorry, just one more thing. I missed it in the chat. Damien Owen asked if there is a study group relating to IFR. There isn't at the moment, but that's actually an interesting idea. So yeah, he can maybe, I'll have a think about it, and we might be able to organise something and get in touch with him. So
for what it's worth too, Matt, at the moment, I'm actually, my IFR is the next thing I'm studying for. So
cool.
If anyone wants to study with me with IFR stuff,
yeah,
work together and beat our heads against this brick wall. So
yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah, definitely, for sure.
All right, everyone. So thank you very much, and we'll shut down the chat now, and I'll get it uploaded onto YouTube very shortly. So cool. Thanks again, and have a great evening.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Carl, again. See you later.